Well, it is 5:07 p.m., so I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Recording in progress.
Yes, I can. We're going to just do a repeat for perpetuity's sake. It is 5:07 p.m. and I would like to call the meeting to order. And with that, oh, I lost my agenda. This is what you get when you try to be super efficient. Hold on, I think I got it. Because I think we do our mission statement first, right?
Yeah, let me just get it pulled up here. Okay, so the first is the agenda introduction. Let me just get the actual agenda.
Yeah, that's right. It won't open for me.
And then to
Oh wait, I got the word one.
commission review. Do you want me to read?
Okay, actually, so we will go ahead and do a brief opportunity for public comment on any agenda items. Anyone from the public? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to our mission review. And Melinda, I shall turn the table a little bit and ask you to review our mission statement.
Absolutely. So the mission of the Police Advisory Board is to offer advice to the St. Albans Police Department for the successful implementation of 21st century policing strategies and to assist the police department in following the established roadmap as amended by the City Council.
Great, thank you. And in today's meeting packet, we did have both February and April's meeting minutes. If you'll recall, we weren't able to approve February's in our last meeting. So is there any comments or questions or feedback on those minutes? No?
I don't know, that's why I want to make sure the record is working.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have a minutes person. Okay, so hearing none, I would look for a motion to approve both February and April's meeting minutes. I'd like to do it in one motion, please.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Chris. Any further discussion on either the February or April minutes? Okay, all in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes from February and April's meeting pass. I did just, Melinda and I talked about this at length, and we did just want to take a moment of recognition. I know in the last week or two, there have been some extraordinary, tragic events, some of which were fueled by hatred and racism, and we know a lot of lives were lost, both here on the East Coast in New York, as well as on the West Coast in California, and I'm sure that I'm missing some, but we just thought, given the volume of those events, it was important for this group to just take a moment of silence for those mass shooting events. Okay, thank you, everybody. Moving on, I know we had Sam with us at the last meeting, and she talked a little bit about wanting to roll out some trainings, and she had to work through some scheduling things, and I think there were 3 or 4 different topic areas. And we just were hoping, maybe Chief, that if you had any updates on where she was at or a timeline when that would start if she hasn't started yet.
The goal is to roll them out in June. She was gone, she's been gone pretty much, not since she was here, but 2 weeks since she was here. She, just give you a little bit of update on Sam, she just completed a week-long training for hostage and rescue negotiations out of state last week. She's back this week, so that will roll out in June. We've got to pick a couple different days to do it that kind of reduces our overtime that's going to be involved in it. Not everything's about money, but it makes sense to do it when we can that way. Secondly, with NCSS, the first round of interviews for the second clinician position will be on June 1st. So that is in process as well.
And do you have applicants?
We do have applicants.
That's-
NCSS.
NCSS is applicants.
Yes, correct.
Oh, that's
Yes.
great. And is it you and a group of officers, or just you who participates in those?
It's going to be a panel of both NCSS personnel and personnel from our office.
Excellent. And I think my only other question, I know she was torn between starting training with some autism awareness and education and training on how to manage folks who are on the autism spectrum, especially when they're in crisis, or LGBTQA sensitivity training. Do you know which she's planning to start with?
So we kind of left up to her, but I think given something else is occurring, I think we're going to go with the autism. So I guess I'll bring this up. We have, starting tomorrow, we had a family reach out to us after the autism patch came out. That was in support of our project, but what their discussion turned to was they have a young 20s family member who for the last couple of years he likes rescue vehicles, that type of, those type of buildings and people and personnel, and particularly vehicles. So he has been washing ambulances at 2 separate rescue operations, and they approached us and asked if we'd come to our building and spend some time during the week washing cars, because he likes the blue lights and likes this. So starting tomorrow, he is going to be coming with 2 of his caretakers, caseworkers, and spending time with us on Wednesday mornings. So with that, I think his presence would be a good time for us to continue this training. So he's had the same caseworkers for multiple years, one I guess 7 years. So we've gotten multiple emails on what to expect. He has some pretty extensive actions he takes when he gets overly excited. So the emails have included what to not do, what to expect, what could happen, and what, how they will react, and us not to react, and to help to even try to assist. So anyway, he'll be there tomorrow, but I think this timing for this training will be good to keep up with that.
That's great. Thank you. Any questions from any of the board members on that training or further discussion? Okay. Danielle, were you able to catch from the minutes what the flavor of that discussion was? I know. With Sam.
Was it a previous meeting or just now? Sorry.
It was the previous meeting, but Sam is going to do some focused training with officers in some of those key areas. Autism and LGBTQA came up in particular last time, but I know there was a couple others that she was going to do too.
Yeah, I'm actually going to reach out to Sam, just because I kind of oversee the programs that specialize in working with individuals who've been diagnosed with autism. And so I feel like I would just want to make sure that it's targeted across the age spectrum. And so we're going to reach out to her around a couple of these, just to make sure that, we're providing the best training that we can, and we have the well-rounded information that would be the best support to the police. So I'll connect with her.
That would be good.
Great, thank you. Anything else? All right, so with that, we will move on to the public survey results. And certainly, I put other data on here. We don't really have a lot of other data to discuss, but I imagine as we look at some of this data, the opportunity to talk about other data points may come up, so I just wanted to leave us some wiggle room to be able to do that. So, let's see, am I in the Zoom anymore?
Yeah, I see you.
Okay, there it is.
Just make sure that you can.
I think I should be able to share the screen. Oh no, that's me sharing the document. Hold please.
Yeah, right at the.
Perfect.
Is it let you? Okay, hold on.
Oh, yes, you
So
did.
just gotta be
You did
aware-
disable the share screening.
There you go, try it again.
Okay, or screen sharing, I should say. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. All right, so board members, you did receive this, and I wasn't aware of how many folks were going to attend by Zoom, so I know you got it a little late in the day, so hopefully you were able to take a look. I'm going to convert to slideshow. We'll see if that works. Yep. So I did want to start this by highlighting, minimize that. So we can't see anybody, so board members, oh, we can still see you on the big screen. You should be able to raise your hands and have us see it, but if not, I will pause at different points throughout this presentation to allow for questions and discussion, so we don't, board members need to save that all until the end. But unfortunately, there was an event, and I can't quite figure out what the root cause of it was, but I did the last batch of about 100 to 150 results. And I am thinking that I had my computer open and the Google spreadsheet was still letting me interact with it, but we were offline at our house. And I didn't catch it because I just trust that Google's always going to save it, and I closed it. And then of course, when I reopened the form, those 150 data elements were lost. And I took it for granted that everything was set so that when I went in to do this presentation, not until last night was when I learned of the gaffe. So that's why we have preliminary on here after chatting with Melinda a little bit in a bit of a panic state, knowing that I wouldn't be able to take the day off from work to enter the last 150 pieces. Really decided that we still have a lot of data, enough data to have some opening discussions. And that even if those 150 pieces of evidence go one way versus another, there's still enough to talk about on either side of our results. So that's why you see preliminary, and that's why you'll see, throughout this, just keep in mind that it is not all of our data results, but it is it is 2/3 of our data results, basically. So just to remind everybody our methodology, we reviewed multiple ways to conduct an independent survey of the St. Albans City and community. And really what we talked about, the importance of doing this was, the community was asking for there to be some independent data. So we were looking frequently at the data the city and chief and SAPD provides, but we wanted an independent data source too, primarily to give us a baseline about our community members, where they were feeling, and also to give them an opportunity to weigh in and comment, and many of them did. Throughout the survey, we got a mixed bag of people just circling, and in some cases people attached an extra blank sheet to their survey and mailed it in with their feedback. So we got a mixed bag, but part of what we really talked about was what was the best and most inclusive way to make sure that we were capturing everybody as possible. A mailed survey, we designed a survey monkey at one point. We thought about doing in-person interviews and did some soft polling just to get us started, or mailing a QR code, which you can scan with your phone in the mail. And ultimately landed on being the most inclusive by doing a mailed survey, so that we didn't accidentally exclude those folks who don't participate online or have smartphones or computer access. So 413 surveys were returned. As I indicated before, only 260 are featured here today due to system error. And there's an asterisk next to that 413 because even as we were working through those, some of them had to be discarded because they came back blank. In a couple cases, unfortunately, there was just some hate commentary written on them. And so there was nothing to include. So while that's the number that we received back, I don't believe that will be the total number of results that we will see, just because some of them are unusable information. In one case, somebody didn't circle anything and hand wrote everything, but their writing was so illegible that I couldn't make heads or tails of what they were trying to say. And we had some opportunities, even like the day after we deployed the survey, we realized we didn't include a deadline for return. So that's a learning opportunity. I discovered a lot of people circled yes, they wanted to hear back from SAPD or from the Police Advisory Board, but then we didn't give them an opportunity to put their contact information anywhere. So that will be an upgrade. And also entering 400 of anything into a system, while it's something that is a Zen opportunity, is a lot of work. and so if we do this again, which there was a lot of requests on the surveys that we make this some sort of regularity, whether it's annual, every 2 years, we can kind of figure that out. But people really, on the most part, were grateful for the opportunity to weigh in on our work and the work of police and their thoughts and feelings of previous department leadership to current department leadership. So it was good, but for the next survey, we want to do an input as you go system, and that will make it a lot easier and sustainable. So I know that these are really small writing. We pulled this right from the data set, which everybody got a quick chance to look at last time. But as you can see, our first question on the survey was, would you call the St. Albans Police Department if you were in an unsafe situation or witnessing one? So, oops, sorry. So as you can see, in our current data set, it's just, we had a lot more ones than I thought. It was, this is very sensitive. I'm just not gonna touch it. So there was about 115 no's to 145 yeses. And so even if all of the rest of the data that was missing comes back as yes, which I'm anecdotally fairly confident it doesn't, it stays a pretty close split throughout. I think that that's enough no's that we probably want to understand it a little bit more. But that being said, although this was our first question, I would also look at this as a lagging indicator. So there was a variety of comments. There was not any one big theme from comments other than people had a bad experience, particularly under previous leadership, and they're holding on to that. So they've brought that with them even though there's been transition. And that seems to be the number one reason why people don't feel that they would not call SAPD if they were in an unsafe situation. But I'm not really sure that we as a group can fix that one question, but I think some of the other things that we might do as we look at some of the other questions will have the natural outcome of improving this data. But I just want to pause there and allow for discussion around this single question set.
Yeah, I guess I hate to have crickets, but I'm slightly surprised, but not totally. And there's a part of me that is, I love this question because exactly like you said, as we move forward, if we were to do this, say annually, and this is one of the questions, that's gonna be a great barometer about how do people feel during this one compared to in a year from now. I feel like that will show if the work that we're gonna continue to do is affecting this, because this is kind of the goal, right? We want people to be comfortable and safe calling SAPD. This doesn't tell us why necessarily, but once we address some of the concerns that we continue to hear and some of the ideas, this would probably be one of the most measurable questions in the future to, now that we've got kind of that baseline.
Yeah. Chris, Danielle, John?
I might have missed if you said this, but in the comment section, were there comments that kind of rose to the top that would help explain this?
There were some people just circled no and didn't offer any comment, but most of the comments were, I've observed negative interactions or have been part of negative interactions. a couple of the thematic pieces, but these numbers weren't huge, so I'm hesitant to say it, but I think it's important because I think it will come out from, the public as we go on. Concern about racial bias and concern about how to manage domestic violence, or children in a domestic or violent or unsafe situation. Seems to be from people who had called in those concerns before and felt that they didn't get a response.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah. But some of them ran the gamut too, and I know we've talked about this before, Chief, obviously, if you've arrested somebody, they may not, that may not have been a positive experience for them, no matter how wonderful the officers might have been, or how professional or how by the book the situation went. So there was a little bit of that too, like, clearly some people had had some negative interactions with law enforcement, but likely because they had been doing something that caused there to be a negative interaction, and they were pretty transparent about that in their responses. So it's a mixed bag, but those two that I mentioned are the two that seemed less about the person's interaction with law enforcement and about their observation.
Thank you.
I don't have any other comments. I appreciate the dialogue around it and understanding a little bit more of the context and the questions and what you were observing when you were inputting the data.
And the comments are all, comments are very hard to get into a presentation that makes sense because they're not standardized, right? But the comments are all available, so once I re-input what was lost, I'll share that with the board so that folks can, see the comments themselves. But it may be worth doing like a word cloud exercise or something like that to see what snippets or words bubble out, even though the whole category might have been, a different story for each person.
I like that idea.
All right, now I will click. And so this, and the slides, the charts got a little silly on me, but are you aware of how to provide feedback or file a grievance with SAPD? And this one, same thing, we're about half yes, half no, but I will caveat the no's with a lot of people said no because I don't have a reason to. So it wasn't that there wasn't a ton of response where I tried and didn't know how to do it. It was more like I never had a reason. Because when we get to our next question, a lot of the people who answered no to this one still answered yes to the following one. So that they believe that if they did know how, they did file a concern, that it would be taken seriously. So, but what this one highlighted for me, and I think we've talked about it before at this committee, is that, there may be an opportunity to do some better or some more proactive advertising around, have a concern, how do you reach out to us online, anything like that people feel like it's a little bit more in their face, and that filing a concern is a normal part of doing business.
I think too, Jamie, from what I remember, that conversation too, a little bit is the process. So if there are not like a ton of ways, but a couple of different ways, depending on someone in the situation that they've experienced, that can create a sense of feeling more comfortable in engaging in that process, that might also help as you make the process more aware to the public of how they can do that.
Yeah, I also, and I don't know if any other law enforcement agency does this or if it's ever happened here before, but just a general feedback card or feedback. So not necessarily filing a grievance, but kind of like, how's my driving?
Yeah.
How's my law enforcement?
You can do, so if you go on the city site, that is our complaint form, but you could fill that out without a complaint. There's a spot in there for also, there's something good on there.
Okay.
So there's an opportunity, you don't have to put your name on it or anything, you still look into everything, whether it's anonymous or
Yeah.
not. So right now, the ways you can do anything like that, right here on the city hall website, or come here, or go to the PD, or flag down any officer, or a phone call.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how else to make it available.
Okay. We have a pretty good social media presence that I wonder if that's just like a rotating social media blast
Correct.
that may.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But, you know, we can, not to get too into the weeds, but I think this one is more about just people understanding that there is a process. And some people did like write-in campaigns where like, well, I would just call 911 if I had a complaint. You probably shouldn't do that, but other people were like, I just call the chief, or I would reach out to Dom. So people had sort of created their own pathways to doing it, but they still answered no, so I didn't feel like I should switch their answer. Anything else on this one? All right. So now you can see what I was talking about where,
Yeah.
in this, do you believe your concern is taken seriously or shared with elected officials in any capacity? Now, a lot of people, I will say, left this one blank, so this one makes me a little nervous that it was a survey structure issue, it was a survey issue, not a person issue, that they just missed that there was a follow-up question. So that's why you see the NA number jump, but for many people, they did answer the first question no, and they answered this question yes. And even wrote a comment to the, I've never had a concern, so I don't know how to do one, but I do believe that if I did have one, it would be taken seriously. And I know stuff comes before city council, we talk about it here. Even though we aren't elected officials at this board, we've been appointed by elected officials to provide guidance. And I know that we did a policy around, you know, the grievance process and what that looks like. So I don't know that there's a lot of work to be done on this, other than to continue to have conversations at these public forums, but board members, your thoughts?
I think this is just a great opportunity to kind of also celebrate, like instead of, you know, what's wrong and what do we need to, like, what are people not taking seriously, or, you know, what are the things we're trying to fix? I think this is a great opportunity to say, like, when people do feel like they're gonna go through that process, they feel like they're gonna take it seriously, and that's great.
Yeah.
Because we wanna celebrate those wins too of what's working well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at, that's a dramatic jump between the last slide and this one.
Yeah,
That's a dramatic.
it is a dramatic change. You have to count the NAs a little bit, but even if you were to combine that orange and yellow, I think, which you wouldn't, because a lot, you know, that's just not how the data worked out, but I think we'd still see, and I can just tell you anecdotally that that's how it read in a lot of cases. No to the first question, yes to the second. And prior to your leadership, Chief, did concerns come on a routine to City Council? Was there the same public discourse that there is now?
I don't know, I really don't have them prior to my arrival.
Okay,
I mean, even though I worked in the same county, I really have no idea, and we made that new internal affairs policy, it was a new internal affairs
Yeah.
policy. That's one, they had one, but I didn't reference it at all. We took that one on the heels of the MRI group coming in,
yeah,
and the two policies, we were, three. The use of force policy, selection policy, and internal affairs policy were the three we were charged with doing right out of the gate. So the internal affairs was literally number one. So we made that right off the bat. I never referred or even reviewed the old one they had. So I don't know what the process was. I think it was good, because I can tell you, I see some of the old ones, I use them if I'm looking at somebody's discipline. I look back to make sure it was a first offense, second offense, whatever. So they had a policy and they used it. I just don't know what the policy was to make complaints or anything. I don't know that.
okay,
I know for sure, we added the, when somebody makes a complaint, we send a letter acknowledging we received it. We send a letter acknowledging it's being investigated. As it's going on, we send a letter acknowledging the findings. That wasn't in place before.
yeah.
So there's much more communication.
So I think all of those things, if people did have a negative view before, which we don't know, I think the survey, to your point, Danielle, shows that people at least feel good that there is a process, and that they can trust, are starting to trust in the process. Anything else on this one? Okay. And the last question of note, And I think I mentioned when I was previewing this data before that in hindsight, this question, I think, created more questions from the community than actually that they answered, but do you feel connected to law enforcement in your community? So the good news is that we see the green a bit higher than the yellow and not a lot of NAs, not a lot of not applicable. So people did answer it. Again, some people, what I saw a lot of was just a lot of yeses, and that was all that was on the survey. Where there were no's, a lot of people did take the time to do comments, and even some folks who did all yeses still took a lot of time to do comments. A lot of the no's really were, I don't feel like I need to be connected with them because I'm a law-abiding citizen, so I don't necessarily want to be connected with them. Some people wrote no, but then just wrote a caveat like, I don't know the officers like I used to in this community, or I don't see them as much as I used to in this community. So it wasn't so much a negative again, for PD as much as their own lives had changed, and so they just, I'm retired, I don't work anymore, so I don't engage with them the same way. And then there were some people who said, there was some opportunity for more community outreach or community opportunities for the public to come interact with the police department, and then there were just some pollers where people just felt like, they only wanted to see law enforcement if there was an emergency or a challenge. So that one was a bit of a mixed bag, but a lot more comments on what do you mean by connected, or am I supposed to feel connected to law enforcement, or I'm new here. So that was the mix on that one. Any questions, comments on this one?
My only thought is just moving forward when we do another survey to change this question somehow, where we can try to target a little bit more, like what do we mean by connected, so it's more clear when somebody is reading it and they'll know, like, is my perception in alignment with what the intention of the question is. But otherwise, it's helpful to see. I still think it's the second question is probably going to be one of the best ones for us to keep consistent year after year, survey after survey, to get a barometer of how things are going.
Yeah.
I also wonder too, something to think about, and I'm still grappling with if question 2 addresses this, question 1 or question 2. When you think about it from like a results-based accountability lens, like you want to get the quadrant 3, kind of quadrant 4, like is anyone better off? Like, and that's usually done through like customer satisfaction. And so is there one that is geared a little bit more towards that? And so that we're kind of addressing, like, I feel like we're doing like the how much of the complaints and how well are they handled, but then like, how do you know that your community is better off because of that?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I do feel like, when we do this again, we can take, and you don't want to over question, right? Because then people won't respond. But hone in on some of these questions, maybe remove some that we feel like we don't need the answer on again, add in new ones, or look for a little different take on some of these questions. The one thing that I think I would do differently, I won't stop people from doing it, but we probably offered a lot more free comment space than we needed to, because there was a lot of typing of free comment. But also, I think people missed the opportunity to do the trackable data because they wanted to tell the story, which was great. It was great to read a lot of these stories. Some not so great, but most of them, were positive or good or really genuine opportunities for improvement that were kind and thoughtful. But maybe just one place to have people be able to weigh in on that, and then leave the rest as just the selection elements. In hindsight, I would probably do our next survey like that.
I think it's a good idea.
And that brings us to the comment trends. So these comments came from across the question spectrum. As I just mentioned, every question had a comment opportunity. And I can tell you that nobody got out of the comments unscathed. So there was lots of great positive for everybody. There was lots of negative for everybody. And depending on which side you were on, it was negative about the board. There was also positive about the board. There was negative about PD. There was positive about PD. There was negative about our community in general, about city leadership, and there was positive. So, you know, when I send this out and you're reading through the comments, just, you know, keep in mind that you're never gonna make everybody happy. But I think it's important for the comments that had a lot less swear words in them. It was probably an opportunity to really look at, when we go back to that first question, most of the people who answered no, I don't feel safe, offered reasonable commentary on why. And that commentary sort of carried throughout their survey. So if they answered that first question no, I found that they might have even still answered some questions yes, but that they offered a lot of commentary throughout about their rationale. And a big one that I wasn't expecting, but that came up a lot, was don't turn St. Albans into Burlington. And so, which I thought was kind of an exciting and interesting question point. But I don't really know what's happened in Burlington that people are petrified of happening here. I know they made some cuts to their police force and maybe that's it, but I don't know what the outcome of that is.
I mean, I think it would have been helpful if somebody's writing that, you know, obviously to say
Yeah.
what exactly are they talking about, because there's been a few different changes, right? So I don't want to make an assumption of
I don't
what they're
either.
alluding to without hearing their
And
intention from that comment.
And with that usually came don't defund police. And I, you know, want to take the opportunity to say, I don't believe we've ever said those words at this committee, nor is that really in our scope. So, you know, as we revisit that mission statement, you know, our job is to identify opportunities to help guide chief and city leadership on opportunities for improvement. And we certainly can ask for funding to be allocated like we did
Exactly.
for you know, the mental health crisis clinician. And I personally will say, you know, I understand the root of the defund police movement, but for me personally, I tend to play the long game and want to plan, you know, so I always think it's dangerous when you just take one out and don't have a plan in place, right? So, and that may be what happened in Burlington, I don't know for sure, but I think for our purposes, our job is to continue to provide that guidance, and maybe at some point the funding will shift, but there has to be the other safety mechanisms in place before I think you can do that safely. So we'll continue to focus on how interactions can be better, training, all of those things, but I don't believe that defund the police has ever been part of our mission. Other board members, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, I'm just gonna highlight that exact thing too, that's why when we went to the city in December, it wasn't to cut the budget not to take from the existing budget, but to shuffle and somehow make happen the additional position without changing, or, you know what I mean? Like, we're not looking to like get rid of certain positions to add others. Really and this is just my personal feeling, is that the goal is that police officers can't be all things to all people. And sometimes that tends to be the expectation, even if it's subconscious by just, you know, general community members. So the goal is to make sure that they have like the immediate access to the position needed to respond in certain situations where they can't be the professional, like they can't be licensed drug and alcohol abuse counselors on top of being mental health workers, hence the reason we asked for an embedded crisis worker, and that's worked out beautifully. And we were able to collect enough evidence of that to ask for the second position, therefore getting, you know, it wasn't us making that decision, we made the recommendation. The community is the one who said, yeah, this is effective and worth it. So I think that, I know for me anyway, my goal has never been to defund, but it's been to accent, if police officers can't be all things to all people, then who's missing from that work and how can we add them in? And similar to the workers, you know, with the work that I do in substance use, there's times that I need access to law enforcement, I need access to Sam, so again, it's like just strengthening those partnerships, which is why I've been so passionate about the
Yeah.
community partnership as a, focus item for so long, and that hasn't been taken off the table, even though it's not on the agenda, there's not any significant updates, but it's just to say that it's so critical for people who are working in this community to have connection with law enforcement without having to, figure out, well, who should I talk to, what's the number, like, there's gotta be some speed dial connections, and I think we've already kind of got that, but it's being enhanced because of the stuff that's being brought to the table and brought to the forefront, so.
Yeah, thank you, Melinda. Any other thoughts? Domestic violence was kind of a common thread between some of these, particularly in what other individuals observed. And I feel like we looked at a policy that was related to,
We did update and make a new policy, hopefully tighten up or increase or better our response and procedure through domestic violence
yeah,
as a result of a way of a couple of them were handled. But that's always going to be probably our worst and hardest investigation to do. It was that way in my last career, and it's that way in this one. Those are tough to do, and they're highly scrutinized and highly criticized because you'll often get, and I'm not making excuses, they're just hard because you'll often get very good cooperation at the time, and I think it's easy to criticize it after the fact. And again, that's why we made a policy so that people can look a little harder and longer and better while they're on the scene, because it's easy to miss stuff.
and in all of the data that you were bringing forward, is domestic violence featured in any of that DV cases?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, so every arrest has a code and even a call that comes in for service. If it comes in it may not often come in as a domestic violence call, but it'll come in as a family fight call.
Okay. And so, my thinking in reading that was just, next time we look at that data, maybe, look at that a little bit and see, and if you get any specific complaints related to that, it would be interesting to see.
I mean, Chris can probably tell Barry about her line of work, but correct me if I'm wrong, but Franklin County for a long time has led the state in domestic violence, or had, where that's changed now. It's, and again, I'm not making excuses, it's prevalent, and
Yeah.
and it's not good, it's not, so that's why we have such a good working relationship with Chris's crew, and why they're so busy, and why we have it. We just put an officer in the office to follow up on those cases specifically.
Mm-hmm.
We dedicate an officer there full-time for that purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the training has definitely helped. Now we have a regular training that we're doing with officers because we started this lethality assessment project. So that training is happening. In fact, we're going to be doing another training, I think in June or July on that. So, and I got to say that, the chief has been really responsive to, if we had issues come up that we were aware of, we always felt that we feel that we can reach out to the chief and have a conversation about them. And he's been real responsive to either, tweaking some of the policies or taking something out that needed to be taken out or whatever. But he's always been real responsive to hearing our concerns. So, excuse me.
Any other thoughts on that? I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but we'll get out of here, I promise, under an hour, but I wanted to just make sure that we really talked about the things that the community is saying to us. Speeding is
I'm
like,
assuming you're talking about cruisers?
I know,
Or traffic in general?
a little combination of both. There was some the police officer always drive through here, but then there was also, they're never here to stop the speeders on my street. So.
I get it. That's all I can really say. I get both sides. We often do go 2 calls without blue lights on, fast and required ship. That's being addressed all the time. I can assure you of that.
Yeah.
And as far as general traffic speeding, that is a issue. I get that too. We get where we can. I can't. We stop as many as we can.
Yeah, and I think people just saw the opportunity to
No, I
highlight.
understand. That's an easy one to see.
Yeah, so, and it was, a variety of it wasn't even just one neighborhood where they were all, it was like every,
No.
they can't be in all the neighborhoods at once. But I do have to say, oh,
Oh, no, sorry, I was just gonna say that's also an area I know for like Swanton PD and for Franklin
Yeah.
County Sheriffs where that is the feedback coming from the community, like
Absolutely.
Franklin, Grand Isle County, and I'm
Bothers
sure
me when it
beyond.
happens. It's okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say the thing that's on Fairfield Street, and I don't know if that's the only one that we have, that tells you how fast you're going is like such a good
There's
little,
one on Nason once in a while.
We move it all the time, so
Okay.
that is one we have, sheriffs have one, VSB has one, everybody moves them all the time, so
yeah,
we normally, we move it, but believe it or not, we move it where people ask us, because we get emails all the time, can you put it there, can you put it there, so we do that on request mostly.
okay.
It does help. We also have some that you can't see, that we have out, so it gives us a true indicator, because it doesn't record plates,
Okay.
it's not to write tickets. What it is for is people, yeah, so nobody's getting jammed up for it. What
we
it is
don't
for,
speak,
so
but we're
people
worried about
often,
parents.
people often call and say, people go by my house at 70 miles an hour all the time. And we'll
Yeah.
put that up to see if it's actually happening, and we're not trying to disprove what they're saying, we're trying to see if there is a need to put extra patrols here.
Yeah,
And a lot of times, it is true, but a lot of times that people are overestimating speeds, and we'll put officers at other places. We'll use that tool to get an accurate depiction of what's happening in that neighborhood,
yeah.
and that nobody can see that one, and it works great. So we have a couple different tools we can use.
And the two, Newton and Weldon came up a lot in these.
Yeah.
I don't
Yes.
doubt it, absolutely.
And Nason was the third one, yeah.
So
those
we're
three.
aware, I mean, it is,
Yeah.
speeding is speeding, you know, we do the best we can, and I can tell you, we talked about this where COVID really slowed down our proactive patrols, those are back, so.
Racial bias amongst officers, that was definitely a common, particularly in the no to that first question, or a lot of people may have answered that question maybe, and we didn't have a maybe option, so that may be something that we want to think about when we ask that question again. So I sort of logged it based on how they wrote their comment. So if they wrote maybe, but it was all like, no, I would never call, I put it as a no. If I would call mostly, I put it as a yes. So that was one sort of funny data element, but that was like a consistent concern, is that perception that there's racial bias, or the belief that there is racial bias. And I know that we look at data related to individuals' race. I know the challenge, the officer is making that decision based on the criteria or their personal.
Their perception.
Their perceptions, yeah. So that's one that we just probably want to keep on the forefront and keep allowing to have discussion around. A lot of thank you for your service, and particularly for you, Chief. A lot of.
That's not me. I appreciate it.
Well, no, the people called you out though specifically, and they offered you gratitude. Particularly, I think as we needed a police advisory board 5 years ago. We don't need one for this particular chief. Was a kind of a common theme, and I think my response to that, and even as I was reading it, was, well, the goal is to prevent from getting to that place again, right? So someday you will choose to retire or move on, and so we want to make sure that the systems outlast the humans. So, and that is the last piece: is the belief that past leadership led to mistrust, and even folks who answered all yes still answered that question that while it's yes for them, they can appreciate why the perception of others might be no, because of past leadership or past actions of individual officers, which I know we've talked about here. A couple places, I didn't put it here, but you'll see it in some of the comment. A few SRO questions came up, so I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that this board did not individually weigh in on the SRO decision. That was a school board decision, so if anyone's watching this recording or here in the public, that's where you want to direct your concerns and feedback about that. And that brings us to the end. Any additional questions, discussions on that?
Katie, I just want to say thank you very much for putting all of that together. I know you have a full-time job, family, all that, and I know this was a tall order, so thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it, and it came out great.
And we'll see, I think that we'll see the patterns stay the same even as those additional surveys came in, because it was almost like one for me, one for you, as I pulled the envelopes from the box. So I don't think we'll see the trends change too much, but it will be good to have the whole gamut. So thank you, Danielle, for that.
Yeah, I want to say thank you too. I mean, the way that you did the PowerPoint, it is very easy to understand, comprehensive. And what comes to mind for me is maybe just as a police advisory board, moving forward, maybe taking a little time to figure out what ought to be the frequency of surveys. Because like you said, we don't want to burn people out because then they just won't fill them out. And also, it would be nice to have an idea of when do we want to do it again, what would it look like, and have at least 1 or 2 questions that we could measure with this one. So I just love the idea of, just letting kind of the thoughts swirl around and get them out in the brainstorming in the coming months so we can be strategic in how we send more surveys, when we send more surveys, what they'll look like. But huge thank you, because I know this was a big undertaking, and I can't imagine entering hundreds of datas being, I think you called it Serenity or something.
It is, it's Zen.
Zen, yeah. So I'm so grateful for you for so many ways.
Every once in a while, there was one that I opened where I was like, oh, am I in an unsafe situation right now? It was a little thicker or it was a little sticky, but it's gonna be okay. So yeah, but mostly I think the general consensus from the folks who responded was that they appreciated the opportunity to weigh in, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that they appreciated that it was sent to their home. So I think as we're looking at this, I think the mailing was the right thing. I do think that I would propose that we add a QR code next time so that if someone does have the capability to scan it in, that we can offer that too. So
I would just say, I was a little skeptical about the survey because I felt like it was coming in the heels of my just coming in here. So it was based on everything prior, and I think a lot of it is, but that being said, I think it's really good to have this, and I think it's well done, and the questions are fair, and I think it gives us a good point. When I say gives me a good starting point, gives me a good starting point where we rolled out all the changes we've rolled out in a very short time.
yeah,
We've only really been at this for just over a year and a half, and I think we've made a lot of very beneficial changes to the community in general. I think that it'll show in a couple of years, but it's gonna take some time. I think people answer any question or survey based on the last thing they remember, whether good or bad.
yeah.
And that's just the way it is, and you can't, it's not often the grand scope, it's that little tiny thing they remember. So I appreciate it, appreciate all the work, and I think it's very beneficial to us.
Great. Well, that was the goal, and I think as our community continues to grow and change too, we can, we can use this to see where because I imagine our pain points will shift over time, we'll nail some things and then something new will pop up. So it's a great way to make this a continuous part of communication and measurement, so.
Yeah, and I'm like impressed and so grateful for the community members that took the time to fill this out and send it. That's huge, because that's what we want to see is where can we celebrate the wins and where can we improve and make change, and not having as many voices as possible makes it more challenging. So I'm so appreciative to the people that filled it out, and I hope that they continue to do that.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that brings us, I'm going to stop sharing now. So board members, you do have this, and I think I'll finish it, and then thank you. We can probably get it publicly out there too. Anything else on our agenda? That was the end, right?
It was the end of the agenda. Yeah, I had one thing, I guess more of an announcement. I don't know if now is the time to make it.
How are you? How are you?
I guess I'm going to get on record now, so it's something that our board can be aware of, but we do have one member that needed to sadly step down, so I don't know what the process is, but we'll be pursuing to figure out what the process is to fill that vacancy. So just wanted to let the rest of our board members know too. So, and I want to publicly say thank you so much to Tom for the service he did, stepping up and doing meeting minutes many times. Super grateful for him. Life just took him in a direction that he can't continue with us. But he sends very positive thoughts and feedback about his experience with us, and he's going to need to be stepping down. So this is still fairly new information, so we weren't prepared to put it on the agenda, but I'm sure it'll be on a future agenda once we figure out the process for that opening.
And I think too, just logistically, did you read the email that said 6 o'clock? Yeah. We started at 5. It was a typo. The calendar invite was for 5, so I'm so sorry. I thought I resent it all to the group. I'm just realizing.
So the meeting is over.
We're just about, but not quite.
I came just in time.
We'll
Is there anything proposal?
So we can, we'll catch you up though after for sure. So the one thing, logistically, I know that we had talked about, we're coming into the summer months, it can be challenging, and at least maybe taking an every other month approach. We'll keep it on the calendar for every month, but just wanting to be flexible to kind of allow for our board members and that we may not have anything on the agenda, and we want these meetings to be meaningful, both for us and for the community. And then also, we're just wondering if people would be open to revisiting the 5 o'clock time start? Are we still?
That's what we're doing, it's 5 o'clock.
Yes, but can we?
Oh, moving
Can
forward,
we
it's
move
gonna
forward
be.
and we revisit that time?
Oh, to change it?
Yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha, sorry.
Sorry, no, that's okay.
I was like,
That's okay. So I think we were at 5 o'clock because we have a Zoom conflict. Does that still exist?
That is no longer a problem
Okay.
for us.
Would starting at 5:30 be a major challenge for anyone? Would that be a problem for you?
I'm working, don't make it hurts me.
Okay, okay. And I say it only because for me, it's a little selfish, but my personal job change now creates an adventure to get here, and it's hard to really leave before 4 o'clock. And so that if I, like today, run into a tractor or a slow driving Prius, I don't have a lot of room for error. So that, and it was below the speed limit, chief, just to be clear. Below the speed. So, but yeah, so maybe we can revisit 5:30, or think about a 5:30 start if that works for folks, and we'll put that into some email conversation. So, with that, I think, Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Nice seeing you again.
Good to see you.
Just remind I won't be here in July because I'll be in Texas, so.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
want to I'll be in July, but I don't have anything coming up for the agenda either, just.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Over.
Okay, and now we can open it up for public comment. Oh, Ryer.
Sorry, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm really appreciative of the moment of silence today. I would prefer, instead of silence, like talking about stuff. When it comes to white supremacy, I think there is an issue. I mean, there's an issue on the St. Albans Police Force. We can pretend there isn't, but there is. I've seen it. I know it's there. And without policies in place to control that and make sure that that isn't occurring, it's hard to call it out. It's hard to bring that attention forward. I'm also concerned with the fact that 6% of all arrests last year were of Black individuals. In a city where the population is only 1.5, that means that Black people are 4 times as likely to be arrested by the police than white people. And that's a really troubling, bad statistic. And it's one that I haven't seen you as a board discuss at all. I haven't seen race discussed at all in this board for the past year and a half. And I mean, for me, when me and a couple other people pitched this board to the city council, the whole idea, I mean, really the impetus for it was the George Floyd murder and was the inequities and disparities that exist around policing when it comes to race. And I would just really appreciate, I know you guys are going to be cutting back on meetings and stuff, but I mean, this is something that's really important. And I feel like in a lot of ways has missed kind of the national conversation around race and policing. And I would just appreciate it if going forward, if that was put as a priority or even just an item. I think it needs discussion, and it definitely is something that I think could be discussed and brought forward, because I mean, 4 times is a big number. That's 6% is a big number, especially when it's such a small demographic in the city. That's just the arrest rate. The stop rate was right in line with demographics, which tells me that the issue isn't necessarily bias, but it is how officers are then treating people based on race. So the stop number was good, which is actually really impressive, but it was that arrest number that was unusually high. And while certainly in a smaller demographic, it's something that can skew that, right? A smaller demographic can definitely skew that. At 6%, that's a really high that would be too high to just be a skew. So I would just appreciate it if going forward, if at some point you guys could look at that and talk about that statistic and that issue, because I think it is important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ryer. We want to get through the public, so I'll take ownership of, I could have put that on the agenda for today, and as we were going through the data elements, wanted to get the public survey out. That was definitely, your concerns were evident in the public survey as well, so the goal is to now overlay the data elements that we were talking about, the arrest rate, the stop rate, with the public survey, so it will become kind of a constant thing that we're looking at and talking about on our meeting as we move forward. So I appreciate you bringing it up today, and we will move forward and make sure that it's there. So thank you. Any other? Ryer, you might be the only. Oh no, I'm sorry. You're here. Do you have any comment from the public?
I think the thing that stood out to me when they did their survey was about the fund the police and then don't turn St. Albans into Burlington. I think that the issue may be, and this is just my own thought, is that the funding piece is the reason why there's an issue going on in Burlington, because there's not enough police presence. And I think that there was a strong police presence, not necessarily saying that it has to be a presence of domination, but just community saying we're here. That would help a whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a balance that we have to exercise at this board to make sure that we're supporting the right initiatives at the right time, and not necessarily putting that all on police officers, but making sure that the city, and recommending that they're funding things that support or the things that law enforcement can support moving forward. But yeah, it was an interesting survey point for sure, so one that we constantly keep in balance, so thank you. Anything else from the public? And from the board?
I think maybe just to clarify, so are we gonna plan on June, or is that gonna be determined via email once we see if we have an agenda?
Yeah. Well, what do board members think?
I think that to Ryer's point, like, we need to spend a solid one of our next meetings really digging in to his point. So I feel like in some ways that is kind of the agenda, because I feel like that will be a deep conversation.
Yeah.
To dig into.
Yeah, and the chief is not gonna be available for the July meeting, so it feels like we really ought to keep a meeting at least in the month of June.
Yeah.
And then if we determine that the agenda would not be big enough to meet in July, we can decide when it gets closer, but I think in order to get his presence and not let Ryer's suggestion take months to address, we probably should have a June meeting and then just discuss then if we want to do July, or July would be the logical month to take off since he won't be available. It's still the summer months, so.
I'm tempted to say let's meet in June, and we will make sure that that is a #1 agenda item, along with some of the other pieces. And I don't, want to lose the sight of, we didn't give a report back here, but we did bring the social media concern to City Council and ask them to follow up, and a huge component of that is that the concern that our officers are engaged in white supremacist activities online. So I think it's worth, digging into that, even though we may not be able to inform the social media policy. I think we can push on that in concert with the other pieces as part of that in June. So let's plan on June, and we will skip July and regroup in August.
So June 5:30.
Yes, June 5:30, if that works for everybody. Same day of the week. I promise to get it right in the email. And we will also we won't spend as much time as we did today, just the updated data with the 150 missing data points. Although I don't expect it to change our trends.
Can I clarify, is the meeting an hour or an hour and a half?
I think we tried for we made it an hour and a half. didn't
We had made it an hour and a half before, so that was the last meeting. I think because when we talked last month, we were talking about possibly skipping a month, because it was a fairly, last month was a heavy agenda. That being said, we didn't foresee a lot to necessarily make a full agenda, and we didn't want people to come for, we had one meeting that was like, I think 24 minutes, because we had just gone through so much the previous month. So for this meeting, my assumption was that you might have shortened it a little bit because we did meet last month and we were talking about skipping a month, but we didn't want to skip this coming month because the timing of receiving the data. So that's why we didn't. And I think for next month too, maybe that would be the meeting to look at it. If we don't see an additional agenda items being added aside from what we talked about tonight, maybe that one could be done in an hour.
Yeah, maybe let's plan on next one's being an hour and a half, and if it's shorter, it will be revealed in the agenda, but just so that folks don't have to step out early if they don't need to. Plan for 90 minutes, and we'll allow the agenda to guide it accordingly. But yeah, tonight we knew that we had, the survey was the number one agenda item, and I didn't think it would take us an hour, but it took us about 45 minutes, so yeah.
Do you have a message in chat?
I think it was Chris
Yeah,
saying that she had
okay.
to sign off.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And I now have access to the PAB email, but if there's something in there and I've missed it, let me know. I'm just getting kind of caught up on it. So have a great rest of the month, and we'll see everybody in June.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, motion to adjourn.
6:13.
God, sorry.
I was waiting for Winnie to make the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you. Sorry.
Second it.
I was in work meeting mode. Yeah, thank you.
Would you like to be?
All right,